Welcome to your deep dive. Today we're diving deep into Ray Kurzweil's How to Create a Mind.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be exploring how our brains work,
Mhm.
whether machines can really think like us, and what the future holds for AI.
Right.
Get ready for a wild ride into the mind,
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one.
yours and the ones we might just create.
Yeah, this book is fascinating because Kurzweil, he doesn't just stick to one field.
Right.
He kind of combines neuroscience, computer science, even a little bit of philosophy,
Yeah.
to really explore this question of what makes us intelligent.
Okay, so how do we even begin with this whole idea of creating a mind?
Well, Kurzweil starts with the human brain.
Okay.
He suggests that the neocortex, the part of our brain that's responsible for higher level thinking,
Mm-hmm.
is essentially a giant pattern recognition machine.
So our brains are constantly looking for patterns. Is
Yeah,
that what makes us intelligent?
I'd say that's a big part of it.
Okay.
Think about it. You can
Yeah.
recognize a friend's face from different angles.
Yeah. Right.
You can understand a sentence even if the words are all jumbled up.
Mm,
That's your brain's pattern recognition at work.
okay.
But what's even more interesting is this same principle
Yeah.
is being used in AI today.
Really? So like voice assistants on our phones, they're using the same kind of principle as our brains.
Exactly.
Wow.
They use these complex mathematical models to analyze data,
Right.
kind of like how our brains build up an understanding of the world.
Okay.
But Kurzweil takes this idea even further.
Yep.
He suggests we can actually simulate evolution in software
Whoa.
to really try to understand how intelligence itself evolved.
Simulating evolution. How does that even work?
So it's kind of like creating a virtual laboratory to see how intelligence might develop.
Okay.
So imagine using computer programs to mimic natural selection,
Mm-hmm.
but at a much faster pace.
Right.
So you could test different theories about how the brain works
Okay.
and see what designs emerge.
That sounds so complex.
It is.
But are we even close to being able to do that?
We're closer than you might think.
Okay.
In fact, this technique is already being used to improve things like speech recognition.
Right.
By simulating evolution in software, researchers can test different parameters, see what works best.
So it's like fast-forwarding evolution to make AI even better. That's amazing.
Yeah,
But I imagine our biological brains are still way more complex than anything we can create in software, right?
that's true for now.
Okay.
Biological evolution is a slow process.
Yeah.
It takes, thousands of years for significant changes to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And Kurzweil points out a key difference here.
Okay.
While we can't just add more neocortex to our physical brains, right?
Yeah.
Technology lets us expand it virtually.
So instead of waiting for evolution to catch up, we can use technology to boost our intelligence right now.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that brings us to one of Kurzweil's most interesting examples.
Okay.
IBM's Watson, the supercomputer that won Jeopardy a few years back.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Watson was incredible. It seemed like it could understand complex language and access just a crazy amount of knowledge.
Right.
Is that what Kurzweil means by, like, creating a mind?
Watson is a really powerful example of how far we've come with AI.
Right.
It combined language processing with knowledge representation to achieve something truly remarkable.
Yeah.
But whether Watson was actually thinking in the human sense, that's still up for debate.
So how do we even measure if a machine is truly intelligent?
Right.
I've heard of this thing called the Turing test. Is that related?
Yeah, the Turing test is like a classic benchmark in AI.
Right.
Imagine having a conversation with someone online.
Okay.
If you can't tell if you're talking to a human or a machine, the machine passes the test.
That's a pretty clever test.
It is.
And what does Kurzweil have to say about the Turing test?
Right.
Does he think machines will ever be able to fool us?
Well, Kurzweil is known for his optimistic predictions.
Okay.
He believes AI will pass the Turing test by 2029. Whether that prediction comes true, we'll have to see.
Yeah.
But it definitely gets you thinking about the possibilities.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
So if we can create machines that can pass the Turing test, what's next? Can we actually build an artificial brain that works just like ours?
Kurzweil proposes a framework for doing just that.
Okay.
He outlines key elements needed to create a digital brain, including those complex mathematical models we talked about earlier,
Right.
along with concepts like self-organization, redundancy, and learning from experience.
So it's more than just copying the physical structure of the brain.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how it Learns and adapts, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
He even talks about building a critical thinking module
Oh, wow.
that could help machines identify and resolve inconsistencies in their own beliefs,
Okay.
which is something our biological brains could maybe use some help with sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes for sure.
Right.
That's a pretty amazing idea.
It is.
But how fast is all this going to happen? Building an artificial brain sounds like a long way off.
Well, that's where Kurzweil's idea of the law of accelerating returns comes in.
Okay.
He argues that technological progress, including AI, it doesn't move in a straight line.
Okay.
It accelerates exponentially.
So like a snowball rolling down a hill, it
Yeah.
just gets bigger and faster as it goes.
Exactly.
Right.
And that means that the progress we're seeing in AI today, it's really just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
The rate of advancement is only going to increase,
Right.
leading to a future where intelligence, both biological and artificial, could expand way beyond what we understand now.
That's both incredibly exciting and a little bit scary. A future where we merge with technology and expand our intelligence, it sounds like science fiction.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But Kurzweil argues that this future might be closer than we think.
Okay.
And that leads to some pretty big questions.
Like what are some of the implications of creating machines that might be as intelligent as us or even smarter?
Well, that's a question that takes us into, like, ethics and philosophy.
Yeah.
We can create machines that think like humans. Do they deserve the same rights?
Wow.
What are the potential risks of creating superintelligent AI?
Right.
These are all questions we'll need to grapple with as we keep exploring the world of AI.
That's a lot to think about. It seems like this deep dive is only just beginning.
It is. There's so much more to explore in Kurzweil's book
Right.
and in the field of AI as a whole.
Yeah.
It's a journey that's full of wonder, full of possibility, and, a healthy dose of uncertainty.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it so fascinating.
Well, I'm definitely hooked. I can't wait to see where this deep dive takes us next.
Me neither.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to uncover about the human mind, the potential of AI, and the future that awaits us.
Right. You know, when we were talking about how fast technology is moving, it really struck me when Kurzweil said our brains are too slow. It makes you wonder, how can our brains even keep up with the crazy processing power of computers these days?
That's a really important point that Kurzweil makes.
Yeah.
Neurons in our brains, they fire at a rate of about 100 times per second,
Okay.
which, it sounds fast,
Yeah.
but compared to the billions of operations a computer chip can do in that same time, it's nothing.
Right. So how do our brains do all the amazing things they do if they're so much slower than computers?
It's all about the architecture. Our brains are massively parallel,
Okay.
meaning millions of neurons are firing at the same time, all working together.
Uh-huh.
It's this parallelism that lets our brains process information in a way that computers still can't match, even the most powerful ones.
That makes me appreciate how incredible our brains really are.
Yeah,
Even with their limitations, they're still the most complex information processors we know of.
absolutely. And that's why Kurzweil believes that understanding the brain's design is so important for AI.
Okay.
We can learn a lot from how evolution solved the intelligence problem,
Mm.
even if our solutions end up looking different.
So this brings up an interesting question.
Yeah.
If we can figure out how to combine the brain's pattern recognition with the speed of computers, what kind of crazy stuff could we do?
The possibilities are mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Imagine instantly accessing all of human knowledge, learning new skills in a fraction of the time,
Wow.
even communicating telepathically with others.
That sounds insane.
I know, it sounds like science fiction,
It does.
but Kurzweil suggests it could actually be within our reach.
That would be incredible. But like you said before, there are ethical things to think about.
Right.
If we start enhancing our brains with technology, who gets access to it?
Exactly.
Could it make the gap between the rich and poor even bigger?
Those are really important questions.
Yeah.
And we need to start addressing them now before these technologies become widespread.
It's right. Right.
We have to make sure the benefits of AI are shared fairly so we don't accidentally create new kinds of inequality.
It's like we're on the edge of a whole new era of evolution where we have the power to change our own destiny, but with that power comes a lot of responsibility, right?
Absolutely. We have to be careful and think about the long-term consequences.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about some new gadgets, we're talking about the future of humanity.
Kurzweil seems pretty optimistic about the future.
he does.
But he also talks about the risks of AI becoming smarter than us.
Right.
He doesn't shy away from the idea that machines could become self-aware and maybe even a threat to humanity.
Yeah, it's important to look at all sides, even the scary ones.
Yeah.
Kurzweil's point isn't to be afraid, it's to be prepared.
Okay.
He believes that if we understand the risks, we can take steps to avoid them.
Okay.
Make sure AI is used to help humanity, not hurt it.
So what are some things we can do to make sure AI is developed responsibly and used for good?
Well, one of the most important things is to invest in research.
Okay.
Not just the technical stuff, but also the ethical, social, and philosophical implications.
So it's not just about building cool stuff, it's about thinking about the consequences too.
Exactly. We need a multidisciplinary approach,
Mhm.
bringing in experts from different fields
Mhm.
to make sure we're asking the right questions.
Okay, so it sounds like we need to start talking about AI beyond just the tech world,
Yeah,
involving ethicists, policymakers, and everyday people.
absolutely. Developing AI should be a team effort
Right.
that considers everyone's needs and values.
I like that.
We need open and honest conversations about the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And we need lots of different voices helping to shape the future of this technology.
We've been talking about AI in a kind of general sense, but what does it actually mean for a machine to be intelligent?
Right.
Is there a clear definition, or is it more of a, philosophical thing?
That's a question that's been around for a long time. There's no single definition of intelligence that everyone agrees on.
Okay.
But Kurzweil, being a computer scientist, he takes a more practical approach.
So instead of getting lost in the philosophy, he focuses on what machines can actually do.
Exactly. He argues that if a machine can do things that we think require intelligence in humans,
Mm-hmm.
then for all practical purposes, we can call that machine intelligent.
Okay.
It's about judging what it can do, not trying to define some abstract idea.
That makes sense. So if a machine can beat a chess grandmaster, write a novel, or even compose music that makes us feel something, should we consider it intelligent?
According to Kurzweil, yes.
Okay.
He sees intelligence as a spectrum, not a yes or no thing.
Right.
And he believes machines will keep moving along that spectrum, eventually becoming better than humans at many things.
That's a pretty big claim. But it's hard to argue with the progress we've seen in AI.
I know, it's amazing.
Machines are already doing things we thought only humans could do.
Absolutely, and it's only getting faster.
Which brings up another question.
Yeah.
What about jobs? If machines can do so much, will we all be out of work?
That's a big concern for a lot of people.
It is.
And Kurzweil gets that, but he's still optimistic.
Okay.
He doesn't think AI will necessarily replace human workers,
Okay.
but it will definitely change what work looks like.
So it's not humans versus machines. It's more like humans and machines working together.
Exactly.
Okay.
Kurzweil believes AI can free us from boring, repetitive tasks.
Right.
So we can focus on things that require uniquely human skills.
Like creativity and critical thinking.
Exactly. Things that machines aren't so good at yet.
That's an appealing thought, but it's hard to picture what those new jobs will look like.
It is.
What kind of skills will be important in a future where AI is everywhere?
Well, being adaptable, flexible, and willing to learn new things will be super important.
Okay.
We'll need to be comfortable working with AI systems,
Mm-hmm.
understanding what they can and can't do, and knowing how to use them effectively.
So it's all about lifelong learning and being ready for anything.
Exactly. It's about taking charge of our own careers,
Hmm.
not waiting for the world to change.
We've covered a lot,
Yeah.
from how the brain works to how AI might change our jobs.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the bigger picture.
Hmm.
How will AI affect our lives beyond just work?
AI has the potential to change almost everything.
Okay.
Imagine personalized healthcare that predicts and prevents diseases,
Wow.
education that's tailored to each student,
Right.
transportation that eliminates traffic and accidents.
It sounds like we're on the verge of something huge.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, but again, I can't help but think about the downsides.
Yeah.
Will everyone benefit from these advances, or will it just make the gap between the rich and poor even worse?
That's a really important question,
Yeah.
and it's one we need to address carefully.
Right.
We need to make sure AI is developed in a way that's fair, equal, and accessible to everyone.
Okay.
We can't create a future where only a few people get to enjoy these benefits.
It seems like AI has the potential to be both amazing and dangerous.
It does.
So how do we, as individuals, navigate this whole thing?
One of the most important things we can do is learn about AI. The more we understand how it works, the good and the bad,
Mm-hmm.
and how it's likely to affect our lives, the better prepared we'll be to make good decisions.
Absolutely.
It's about becoming informed citizens in this age of AI.
Yeah.
We can't just sit back and let technology decide our future. We have to be part of shaping it.
Exactly. It's about being curious, asking questions, and getting involved.
Yeah.
The future of AI isn't set in stone. It's something we're creating right now with our choices and actions.
It's kind of empowering to think that we're not just, standing by and watching all this happen.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to, like, the core of Kurzweil's book, How to Create a Mind.
Okay.
He's not just talking about these ideas, he's, like, laying down a challenge.
A challenge to do what?
To think bigger.
Okay.
To push the limits of what we think is possible, and to use what we know about the brain to create a future that's good for everyone.
It sounds like he's calling for a new era of, exploration.
Yeah, but this time it's not about discovering new places. It's about understanding the unknown parts of our own minds.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And one of the most fascinating things about Kurzweil's approach is how much he focuses on understanding the algorithms of the brain,
Okay.
the underlying principles that make it work.
So it's not just about copying the physical structure. It's
Right.
about understanding the software, the code that makes it run.
Exactly. And that's where the connection to artificial intelligence gets even deeper.
Okay.
If we can figure out the code of the brain's algorithms, we can use that to design machines that are even smarter and more sophisticated.
It's like we're trying to unlock the secrets of intelligence itself. But how do we even start to understand something as complex as the human brain?
Kurzweil thinks the key is in the brain's ability to recognize patterns.
Right, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Hierarchical pattern recognition. That's
Exactly.
how we build complex ideas from simple building blocks.
Right, like recognizing a friend's face from different angles or understanding a sentence even if the words are mixed up.
It's all about patterns.
It is.
And Kurzweil says we can use this same principle for artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
We can design machines that learn to recognize patterns, make predictions, and even solve problems like we do.
Exactly.
It's pretty mind-blowing to think we might be able to create machines that not only think like us, but also have things like creativity, intuition, even compassion.
That's the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah.
To create machines that are not only smarter than us in some ways, but also embody the best of what it means to be human.
That's a vision that's both inspiring and a little scary.
I agree.
It makes you wonder what our relationship with these super advanced machines will be like.
Right.
Will we see them as partners or something else entirely?
That's the kind of question that science fiction writers have been asking for years.
Yeah.
And it's one we're going to have to answer as AI keeps evolving. Kurzweil believes that in the end, we'll merge with our machines,
Okay.
creating a kind of hybrid intelligence.
Right, that brain-computer merger idea.
Exactly.
We could totally change what it means to be human.
Absolutely.
Kurzweil sees this as the next step in human evolution,
Yeah.
a way to break free from our biological limits and reach a level of intelligence and awareness we can't even imagine right now.
That's a pretty bold prediction.
It is.
But whether Kurzweil's right or not, one thing's for sure.
Yeah.
The future of intelligence is going to be unlike anything we've ever seen.
We're living in a time of incredible technological change.
We are.
And as we explore AI further, it's important to do it with a sense of wonder and responsibility.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, that was your deep dive into the mind and the future of AI.
It was a great discussion.
We explored some really interesting ideas from Ray Kurzweil's How to Create a Mind.
Yeah. A lot to think about.
If you're curious about AI and where it's all going, I definitely encourage you to keep learning.
Absolutely.
It's a fascinating field.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep imagining what's possible.